You don't disappear from her life all at once. You fade, quietly, slowly, like a song she didn't realize she loved, until the silence started hurting. There was a time when your presence felt ordinary to her, your messages predictable, your patience endless. You were always there, so available that your absence felt impossible. And that's exactly why she didn't notice your value while she had it. But here's the part no one tells you: women don't miss men when they're still trying. They miss them when the emotional gravity finally stops pulling. Welcome to Female Code Unlocked, the place where we decode what's never said out loud. If you want to understand attraction, absence, and the psychology behind emotional regret, subscribe now. Because once you see this pattern, you'll never unsee it. Now listen closely, because this isn't about revenge. It's about awareness. She doesn't start missing you the moment you leave. That's a fantasy men tell themselves to survive heartbreak. In reality, your absence at first feels like relief. The pressure is gone. The expectations disappear. She tells herself she's finally free. Free from responding. Free from explaining. Free from the mirror you unknowingly held up to her emotional inconsistencies. At first, she breathes easier. But then something subtle happens. Days pass, weeks maybe, and life returns to normal, except one detail feels off. Conversations don't hit the same. Attention feels shallow. The men around her try, but none of them understand her rhythm the way you did. None of them notice the silence behind her words. None of them remember the small things she never said out loud, but expected to be seen. That's when the comparison begins. Not consciously, emotionally. She scrolls. She laughs. She goes out. But something feels hollow. Because you weren't just consistent, you were emotionally predictable in a world that's chaotic. And when a woman takes that stability for granted, she doesn't feel it until the nervous system realizes it's no longer safe in the same way. You see, attraction isn't stored in memory, it's stored in emotion. She starts missing you when her mind is quiet, late at night, early in the morning, during moments that don't distract her. That's when your absence speaks louder than your presence ever did. Not because you were perfect, but because you were familiar. And familiarity creates emotional grounding until it's gone. Here's the dark part: she doesn't miss you first. She misses how she felt around you. She misses being chosen without chasing, being understood without explaining, being emotionally held without asking. And once that feeling disappears, the brain starts rewinding, replaying moments she once ignored, your calm responses, your patience, the way you stayed when she pulled away, not realizing that every time she pulled, you were teaching her that you'd always return, until you didn't. And that's when regret doesn't come as pain, it comes as confusion. Why do I keep thinking about him? Why does nothing feel the same? Why do I miss someone I thought I was done with? Because emotional value is invisible when it's abundant, but devastating when it's removed. She starts remembering the version of you she assumed would always be there, the safety she mistook for weakness, the consistency she labeled as boring. And suddenly, the men who excite her don't calm her, and the man who calmed her is gone. That's when missing turns into longing. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, heavy, persistent. And the irony? By the time she fully understands what she lost, you're no longer the same man who was willing to be taken for granted. She doesn't admit it right away. She can't. Because admitting she misses you means admitting she misjudged you. And for a woman, that realization cuts deeper than losing a man. It threatens her sense of emotional certainty. So instead, she rationalizes. She tells herself it's nostalgia, loneliness, habit, anything except the truth. But the truth keeps surfacing. It shows up when she reaches for her phone and stops, when she types your name and deletes it, when she wonders if you've moved on, not because she wants you back yet, but because the idea of you being unavailable unsettles her. You were supposed to be constant. You were supposed to be there if she ever decided to choose you fully. And now, that option feels uncertain. That's when the power dynamic quietly flips. You see, when a woman takes a man for granted, she unconsciously places him below her emotional awareness, not because she doesn't care, but because she assumes his investment outweighs her own. And the moment that assumption collapses, the mind scrambles to restore balance. That's why she starts replaying moments she once dismissed. The way you listened without interrupting, the way you stayed calm when she tested you emotionally, the way you didn't demand reassurance. You were reassurance. And suddenly, those qualities don't look ordinary anymore. They look rare. Here's the psychological shift most men never notice. She begins to miss you when she realizes she can't replace the role you played, not just the connection. Other men may excite her, distract her, validate her, but you regulated her emotionally. You grounded her nervous system. You made chaos feel quieter. And when that stabilizing force disappears, the body reacts before the mind can explain it. Restlessness, irritation, emotional fatigue, a sense that something is missing but unnamed. That's when she starts checking your social presence, quietly, indirectly, through friends, through patterns. She wants to know if you're still emotionally available without having to ask, because asking would mean vulnerability, and vulnerability would mean admitting loss. And loss terrifies the ego. So she waits. She hopes you'll reach out, hopes you'll break the silence, hopes you'll be the same man who once overgave without limits. But every day you don't, the absence becomes louder, heavier, more personal. And here's the paradox. The more emotionally complete you become without her, the more incomplete she begins to feel without you. Not because she suddenly loves you deeply, but because she's forced to confront the truth she avoided. She benefited from your presence more than she ever acknowledged. She starts remembering the moments she felt safest, the laughs that came effortlessly, the arguments you handled with maturity. And slowly, regret replaces certainty. But regret doesn't rush in like pain. It creeps in like doubt. What if I misread him? What if I lost someone who actually cared? What if no one shows up for me like that again? That's when missing becomes personal. Not about what you did for her, but about who she was when you were around. And that's the deepest form of loss. Because people don't miss love. They miss versions of themselves they felt alive inside. And by now, you're different. You're no longer waiting, no longer over explaining, no longer trying to prove your worth through consistency. You learned the hard way that being taken for granted isn't about lacking value. It's about offering it too freely to someone who hadn't earned the responsibility of holding it. So when she finally feels it, truly feels it, it's not longing that hurts her most. It's the realization that the man she misses no longer needs her to see his worth. And that silence, that's the sound of emotional consequence. When she finally reaches out, it doesn't look like an apology. It doesn't sound like regret. It rarely even mentions the past. It's casual, almost careless, a reaction to a story, a late night, hey, a question she already knows the answer to. Because when a woman misses a man she took for granted, she tests the emotional temperature before she risks exposure. She wants to know if the door is still unlocked, without knocking loud enough to be rejected. And this is where most men undo everything. They respond too fast, too warmly, too familiar, as if nothing changed, but something has changed. Because the moment she reaches out, she's not chasing you. She's checking whether the old version of you still exists. The man who made himself available. The man who filled silence. The man who absorbed emotional imbalance without complaint. She's listening not to your words, but to your energy. Are you still orbiting her? Or have you found your own center? Here's the psychology most people miss. When she contacts you, her emotions are ahead of her logic. She hasn't decided what she wants. She's responding to discomfort. The discomfort of absence, of not knowing, of losing emotional control over a situation she once felt certain about. So if you rush in to soothe that discomfort, you teach her the same lesson again, that your presence is guaranteed, that no matter how long she took you for granted, you'll still collapse into familiarity the moment she opens the door. And then the missing stops. Not because she healed, but because the mystery died. What actually unsettles her is not your availability. It's your emotional independence, the calm neutrality, the grounded response, the sense that you're no longer waiting for her to define your worth. That's what creates tension. When you respond with presence but not pursuit, warmth without hunger, clarity without attachment, her mind can't place you where you used to be. And that uncertainty is what reignites attraction. Because now, she's not just missing what she had, she's curious about who you've become. This is where the dynamic shifts from memory to desire. She starts noticing the distance in your tone, the pause before your replies, the fact that you don't over-explain, don't ask for reassurance, don't fish for validation. And suddenly, The emotional leverage she once held feels gone. And that scares her more than losing you ever did. Because emotional security is addictive. And when the source of that security no longer needs her, the nervous system reacts like withdrawal. She feels it in her chest, in her thoughts, in the way she replays conversations looking for meaning between your words. Why isn't he asking more? Why does he sound different? Why do I feel like I'm the one reaching now? That's the moment the tables turn, quietly, invisibly, powerfully. Not because you played a game, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. And here's the final truth, the one no one warns you about. Sometimes she doesn't come back fully. Sometimes she only circles, not because she doesn't care, but because coming back would require facing the version of herself who didn't choose you when it mattered. And that level of self-confrontation is painful. So instead, she stays close enough to feel you, but far enough to protect her ego. And that's when you must decide. Do you reopen the door to someone who only recognized your value through loss? Or do you honor the growth that came from being underestimated? Because the real transformation wasn't hers, it was yours. You learned that love without boundaries teaches people how to treat you. That consistency without reciprocity becomes invisible. That being taken for granted is often the price of staying too long where you were no longer being chosen. And now, whether she returns or not, you're no longer available for half decisions. That's the kind of absence that changes people. If this resonated deeper than expected, stay connected with Female Code Unlocked. Because understanding psychology isn't about control, it's about clarity. And clarity changes everything.